A lot of people want to short track, especially when it talks FedRAMP, they want to short track to authorization. Like, how do I get there as fast as I can, as cheap as possible? And it doesn't go hand in hand. You can't do that with FedRAMP.
Mm-mm.
So there are companies like yours that can help speed up the preparation side of things. And then there's 3POs who can, if they have the right people and availability, they can speed up the testing side of things. But sometimes there's a timetable to it, and people just don't realize that. And it's a decision point or an explanation point we have to have early on that, like, this is not going to happen as fast as you think it will. And then in the end, when we do our assessments, we end up with a bunch of findings, and sometimes that delays when we can actually submit everything, and they have to go back and remediate a couple of things. So there's not an end all be all solution to everything. That's where the partnerships are key, and understanding what each type of company can do. Like, what is Paramify's skill sets, and where can they add the value? Where can a 3PO add a value? When do you bring in someone like Paramify? When do you bring in the 3PO? A lot of people want to bring us in when they're like ready to go. But if you brought us in earlier, we can kind of help get you over the hurdles that might happen later on where you had too many findings. So that's why we like to at least be in the discussions early on, but not necessarily, we don't have to start that early. We can start later.
What's up, everybody? My name is Kitty Scott. This is the Paramify podcast. Today we're with a good friend of mine, a colleague, Michael Carter, who's the founder of Fortreum, one of the foremost 3PAOs in the business, third-party audit organization. To be clear, Michael's been in this area for a very, very long time. He's also a professor at James Madison University, which is a little hack for talent, right?
That's good. Yeah, get some good people from there.
Yeah. You've done work for the IRS. You've done work for Coalfire, for Veris Group, which was bought by Coalfire, and that's how you were part of Coalfire. And so now, you started your own firm 3 years ago. This is crazy. This is really cool, and I want to talk about this. So you had your birthday 2 days ago?
Yeah, our anniversary day was July 15th.
July 15th. We're recording on the 17th, and we'll see when this actually gets published. But congratulations, you're number 3. Number four, which is, it's just bonkers that you guys have had such growth and such success. I know that our clients absolutely love working with everybody at your organization. So I'm just honored to have you on the podcast today, and it's going to be great to talk about some updates to FedRAMP and all that stuff. So thanks for being here, Mike.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. All right. So tell us a little bit about your journey. So just getting into this space, how did you start? How did you get into this?
Yeah. So I graduated from James Madison University. I didn't do any like cyber classes in school, but I ended up working for the government. I was a OIG auditor for GSA. And so like Bo Burles, who's a CISO of GSA, I was his auditor back in the day. Wow. And I ran the FISMA assessments that they did every year. So I did it for 2 years. And then I said, all right, I'm gonna try something a little different. So, but I had the desire to do the security field. So I shifted from the government and I went and worked for a company called Nortel Government Solutions. And I ran their FISMA assessments for various clients. It was OPM, Treasury, NASA, some of those. And then ended up working at a company called Veris Group. I was employee number 6. So I got in early, started doing the same thing, ran some FISMA assessments there, ended up at the IRS for 5 years where I wrote SSPs for some of their bigger systems.
Amazing. I bet that was just riveting.
Yeah, it was, it's interesting when you write like an SSP for like, when you go to file your taxes and you do the electronic filing. So I'd write SSPs for that, or their enterprise network general support system. I wrote their SSP for that. So those are back in days, you'd have 8-hour phone calls just to get all the documentation you needed to fill out the SSP. And then you have a couple of weeks to write everything. So I did that. And then in late 2011, GSA released the RFP to be 3POs, and none of us knew what it was. So we're reading into it. And I said, all right. So I helped write the response for that. And then like early 2012, we found out we won. We were the first 9 that got approved. So then I kind of like raised my hand. I was like, all right, I'll take it on. I'll do it.
Yeah.
So started figuring out what that would look like. Didn't have a team. We didn't really have pen testers that did any of that type of work. We had people who understood how to run Vuln scans, things like that. But it was so new that we had to figure it out from scratch. Got a couple of early contracts, but for the next couple of years, we just kept chugging away, and we got multiple contracts. We ended up being the top 3PO for the first couple of years. And then in late 2016, Veris Group was sold to Coalfire, like you were saying. And then that took the top two and kind of combined them into like a big number one.
Yeah.
So I went over to Coalfire. I started running their FedRAMP assessments. So their team kind of merged in with mine. And we started taking all of the big guys. We had Amazon, had Microsoft, had IBM, Google, Oracle, and then you had the smaller guys as well. So it's a whole different type of assessment when you're dealing with the enterprise versus the smaller ones. And I did that for a couple of years, and then COVID hit, and you kind of like you rethink everything when COVID came about. And I was traveling a lot, and I said, you know what? My kids are young, like they're at a good age, like I want to be home more. So I stopped the traveling, and then I said I could do this for myself, like start a company. So my business partner, who has more like the sales side of the equation, he and I kind of formed together and said, let's start a company. So within a year, we became a 3PO, which was 3 years ago now, and just kind of gone from there.
It's crazy because I kind of started the first vestiges, like what's left. I started my consulting I was kind of reluctant to start Paramify, honestly, because it's a tough space for a lot of people. It's really hard. I was kind of reluctant to start it, honestly. And that was in 2019, the very beginning of it. And we're just now at that stage where we're starting to ramp. And so it's just amazing. 3 years. Obviously, you have a lot of domain expertise here, right? So you're not just like, you know what? You graduate from college, I'm going to start a company. It's going to be a successful one, right? So tell us a little bit about that, like what goes into starting like building a world-class organization.
Yeah, it's a lot more work than you think, as you're seeing yourself too. My biggest thing that I feel like I got lucky on is I surround myself with good people. So a lot of our early employees were people I've known before, whether it is my business partner or, our finance team or our delivery team. Like they're just people that we've known for a long time. I trust them. When we first started out, we set our 4 core values. The first one is quality matters most. Like it's the way you get work. Like if you deliver good work, people will refer you to other people. You get recurring work from the same customer, so it's key. We also like to look at everything through like the customer's eyes. But the other 2 values we have is the autonomy to do your own job. Like I'm not a micromanager. I'm very much hands off. You got a job to do, get it done. I don't care when you get it done, where you get it done, it doesn't matter. And then just the ability to kind of, drive forward and have that entrepreneurship that everyone should have as you're getting into like a small company, because we all wear many hats. We all do a lot of different things. And it's just one of those things that I look for when I recruit people is, are they similar in nature to us? Like culture is big for me, making sure we have the right types of people in-house. But then just people who also can think outside the box. Like I don't know all the answers, but what I try to do is surround myself with people that are super smart and can just take it and run with it and go with it.
Yeah. Okay. That's amazing. So it's all centered around people.
It is. Right? Yeah.
And trust.
Trust.
You move at the speed of trust.
Exactly. And that culture, I want people to feel at home. I want people to feel comfortable. Like I said, like if you got a doctor's appointment, like I don't need to know, like just go do it. It's what we all do. I mean, we're all balancing it out. But just have that culture where everybody is comfortable in doing it.
Yeah. And you're leading with quality. I love that. Quality, if something is really, really good, it forces you to have empathy for whoever is going to receive the deliverables. You got to go, okay, like quality. It's got to be really good. Yeah. And it's like that, not good enough, not good enough, not good. Okay, this is good.
Yep.
Now we go. And so I think I heard the CEO of Airbnb also talk about that culture of excellence, and that it's not ping pong tables. It's not any of that. It starts with quality, completeness, just doing an amazing job. And when people can really lock in on like, I'm really proud of what I just did.
Yep.
I'm really proud of how I just answered AC2 Part D.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I'm proud of how I did that, how I organized it, how I made it great for the client. And then, like you said, it just begets winning, right?
Yeah.
And winning begets more winning. And I think I've heard offline, we were talking about this before the podcast a little bit, just sharing stories. You can have anything you want, but you can't have everything you want.
Yeah.
So there has to be a focus.
Yep.
Absolutely. Otherwise, you're going to do nothing well.
Exactly.
Right? So if you can kind of get in that niche and focus on quality and completeness and all that, you really can start making some.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, so with quality being our number one value, like we actually hired our director of quality probably in our first 15 hires. I can't remember when she came on board. But it was strategic because we knew we had to have high quality deliverables in everything we did because we get audited ourselves.
Right.
But more importantly, I don't want to turn in something to a customer that I don't feel comfortable to stand behind. So all of our testers go through a lot of rigorous training. But then they make sure that they produce deliverables that it's not a check the box. We're going to do a hard assessment. You're going to get a bunch of findings from it. It's okay. But in the end, you feel better because you're like, all right, I've kind of locked everything down. I look a little bit better than I did before I started this assessment. So I want to make sure quality is through everything that we do, because that is how we get a lot of our repeat business. A lot of our customers are people I've known for years. And it's just because they've trusted the way our teams are structured and some of the leads that I have on my team that they've been leads for that company before. They just want to be around those people because we don't like to use the term partner because we're 3PO and we're independent, but you're on a journey. You're on this whole journey together between whether you're doing a readiness assessment or the actual assessment. And then you got to get in front of the PMO or the JAB or an agency and explain the package. Yeah. You have to be there to back it up. So it's a long process and you don't want to be with, somebody that can't stand behind the work that they do. So I make sure that everybody is properly trained and prepared for all the aspects of the assessment that they'll have.
Yeah. I think what's cool about FedRAMP, it's a little different than ICPA audits like SOC 2 and SOC 1s and other things like that. While you are independent, you do kind of have to advocate for those, right? It's your neck on the line.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And they have to know that you're independent. So yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So when you found your how did you know you had your quality person? How did you know she was the one?
Oh, I've known her for years. So okay. I knew, and the second I could grab her to bring her over, I was excited to do it. So yeah, she was a rock star hire.
Awesome. That's so cool. Yeah. So people and for our younger listeners, don't burn bridges.
No.
Right. It's a small world.
It is a very small world. We've known each other for 10, 12 years now, probably when we first met back in a couple companies ago for both of us.
Yeah, that's right. Right. Yeah, exactly. And I'm so glad I didn't burn any bridges because I tend to be pretty unfiltered when I talk. I just kind of speak that's why I have to be my own boss.
Yeah.
Because eventually we'll get HR, right, to kind of keep me in line, right? But but no,
it's totally true. Even in the 3PO community, those of us that do a lot of assessments, we actually very cordial around each other. So we meet regularly, whether it's through, a conference that we're all attending or something like that. We've done dinner together. Sounds odd, but you share a lot of similar grievances with the program or concerns about what does this requirement mean, and kind of just talk to each other about it. So it is a small world. So even if you might work at a different 3PO, you still have the same issues that you see.
That's right. It's a small world, but there's a lot room for a lot of winners.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So partnerships is really key. Going into that vein of you can't do everything.
No.
You can do some things really great. So talk a little bit about maybe for the enterprise listeners, how they should be viewing tools and partnerships. We get every now and again, someone really big, high exec that's kind of far away from the actual decisions and maybe doing the work, where they're looking for the silver bullet, the one system to do everything. Have you seen that? How do you see that play out usually in your experience?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of people want to short track, especially when it talks FedRAMP. They want to short track to authorization. How do I get there as fast as I can, as cheap as possible? And it doesn't go hand in hand. You can't do that with FedRAMP.
Mm-mm.
So there are companies like yours that can help speed up the preparation side of things. And then there's 3POs who can, if they have the right people and availability, they can speed up the testing side of things. But sometimes there's a timetable to it, and people just don't realize that. And it's a decision point we have to, or an explanation point we have to have early on that like this is not going to happen as fast as you think it will. And then in the end, when we do our assessments, we end up with a bunch of findings, and sometimes that delays when you can actually submit everything, and they have to go back and remediate a couple of things. So I don't, there's not an end all be all solution to everything. That's where the partnerships are key, and understanding what each type of company can do. Like what is Paramify's skill sets, and where can they add the value? Where can a 3PO add a value? When do you bring in someone like Paramify? When do you bring in the 3PO? A lot of people want to bring us in when they're like ready to go. But if you brought us in earlier, we can kind of help get you over the hurdles that might happen later on where you had too many findings. So those are that's why we like to at least be in the discussions early on, but not necessarily, we don't have to start that early. We can start later.
Yeah. A lot of people want the easy button.
Yeah.
Even with AI, I think we're further and further away from an easy button, honestly, with respect to some things, because it's more and more complex, right? Environments. We had our security engineer kind of build out. We haven't been around that long, but he was doing our network diagram, and he used a technical tool, and he's like, "Here's our network," and I'm like, "Oh my gosh!"
Yeah.
I'm like, "What's that doing there still?"
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's so complex, so fast, and we're like a young company, and so it is important to bring people who know, like early, and often.
Well,
you can't abdicate it.
Exactly, and the requirements change all the time. Like right now, we're in the middle of the Rev 5 transition for everybody, but PMO keeps putting out new guidance. There's new framework ideas coming out. There'll probably be new boundary guidance out here soon. So it's always changing, and that's a good thing. You need to have that out there. Back in the early days of FedRAMP, like there was no way, like fun story. So when we would run scans and you get a bunch of scan findings, there was no ability to like parse them like people have now, where you can run a bunch of scripts and figure out what findings are tied to what plugin. So we literally were like putting it in a Word doc and like highlighting it if it got remediated. I mean, that's the type of action that happened. We're talking early 2012. But it happened. And then everybody's kind of progressed since then. We did, PMO and JAB briefings can take a while to kind of go through all that. But the very first, I led the very first JAB PATO, and the briefing was great. And it was a day, I think it was 2-day session. And we sat at a table, it was 1 day. And we sat at like a U-shaped table. And I'm at the middle of the U, and our client was at the other end of actually he might have been remote. And we had a video chat, and we literally just pulled up the SAR, and we pulled up the SSP, we made changes on the spot. By the time we walked out the door, it was done. So that doesn't happen anymore because there's too many packages in play.
Yeah.
But that's how it was done. And now you've got multiple reviews, and you're digging into diagrams deeply, and it's a good thing. It's just a lot of work. And that's where the easy button would be nice, but you can't, because there's a lot of things out there. When we started FedRAMP, containers wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
So now you're dealing with that. So the new container scanning guidance that was put out, and how do you interpret that, and how do you put those results in the SAR? Like, they're just kind of the ever evolving changes that are happening that we all have to stay abreast of.
Do you feel like there's they've been quicker to adapt to new technologies that came on? I mean, Kubernetes been out for a long time.
Yeah.
Right. And we're just recently getting,
Yeah, I think it's the pace of government.
Mm-hmm.
I know recently when FedRAMP came out with their new board, they've been releasing a lot of new things out now. So I think there's maybe a little backlog because of that coming out. But I do think they do a good job compared to kind of the rest of government in terms of how fast they release it, how quickly they require people to implement it. So I think you're going to see that continue to change and continue to get faster. Mm-hmm. But there's going to be something else post, AI here that we're going to all have to deal with and figure out how that's going to work in the FedRAMP space.
Yeah. I get emails all the time about like our AI certification, the ISO 42000, whatever number it is. Right.
Yeah, I know.
It starts with a 4, and I think the next number is 2. And I think there's a 0 in there. I'm not sure about the rest. Maybe a 1 or a 2. I don't know.
I can't remember off the top of my head.
I don't know. I get emails all the time about how I'm thinking about it. And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
We're running them inside our own. Okay. I'll use ChatGPT every now and again.
There you go.
Come on. Not with anyone else's data, of course. I promise. Yeah. All right. So, okay. So we talked a little bit about getting into it. So I know we've gone through this journey together. Hey, Michael, this person, they asked me about, can I get FedRAMP next month? And so, and you were actually one that like talked to this person, right? and a lot of people don't understand how big FedRAMP really is. So when people are thinking about FedRAMP, obviously we want to go sell into the government. CMMC, that's going to change a lot, right? Because every single cloud service provider that these contractors that do business with the government, they have to be CMMC. And so every cloud service provider that they use has to be at least FedRAMP equivalent.
Correct.
So this is going to get bigger and bigger.
Oh, yeah.
So what would be a message for them specifically, for those cloud service providers that will need to get FedRAMP equivalency or something very soon?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the earlier discussion. I think you get out there and you talk to either a C3PO or an advisory firm who understands like what the requirements are, figure out what level you need to attain, and just do it early because it's coming. It's coming fast, and people are going to have to be ready. So I think it's just getting out there and understanding what those requirements are, and then quickly implementing them.
What are some common mistakes that you're seeing still to this day? And maybe we can go, what was it before? Right?
Yes. So with FedRAMP, a lot of the issues that we still see is a lot of scanned findings. That's where the bulk of the findings always are in assessment. And in my opinion, I think that's, yes, you will always have scan findings, like that's a given. But can you run a full set of credential scans before we come in, patch everything, and then it should be theoretically cleaner when we get in? So, I mean, if we're coming in running scans and we're finding CVEs from 2020, like that's a problem. You should have had that fixed by then. But that it still happens. We expect to have a couple control failures every year. I think that's just, things happen, things change over time. Documentation gets out of date because you don't keep it current. But scans are something if you're running it regularly on a monthly basis. So we generally recommend if you're a smaller staff and you can afford it, outsource your Kanban activities on a monthly basis. Have someone running the scans. Have someone producing the reports that go to the government for the review. Those Kanban reports are due monthly. If you can't do that, then figure out a way to train that internal person that you have to do that work. Because it's so key. Because if you mess up and you're not producing or you're not scanning the full inventory, when we come in as a 3PO at the end of the year for your annual review, it's going to show. And then it looks like you've been kind of not fabricating the data throughout the year, but you don't have a full set throughout the year. So then PMO and all them are going to ask what happened for the rest of the year. So that's big. Under Rev 5, the big thing this year is the red team. So red team's it's a big time sink. It takes a lot of time to do a proper red team. It's not cheap. Thankfully, the PMO has come out and said, you don't have to outsource it. It doesn't have to be a 3PO does it, but it just has to be done. So whether you do it in-house yourself or you outsource it to a 3PO, but we always tell people on that front, it's one of the first, when we're talking to somebody that's new in the FedRAMP space, okay, you want to get this done, but that should happen before we do our assessment. And the reason being is you have to have the artifact that comes out of it to pass the CA8 enhancement 2 control. So start early with that, then come in and do the rest of the assessment after.
CA8 enhancement 2.
Yeah.
That's right. So maybe we can talk a little bit more about what's different about Rev 4 to Rev 5. In the past, the penetration test was just like more targeted, right? Authenticated, announced, or unannounced. Red teams would be more at the organization level, correct? Yeah,
and that's it's a big misconception. A lot of people think it's, an enhanced pen test or something like that. And it's not. And FedRAMP's put out draft guidance for what the red team is. And what they did is they took the FedRAMP guidance that was out there for pen testing and added an appendix. And the appendix is going to tell you, how do you set your objectives for the red team? Go in and execute it. You should have a test plan and a report. Those are your main 2 deliverables from it. And that's out there. Still draft. It's not final yet, but hopefully here coming soon it will be finalized and everybody understands it. But it's supposed to be an organization-wide test to test how you would respond and react to a potential incident or somebody coming in and attacking you. Whereas the pen test is the focus on the application itself. So on the offering tenant-to-tenant test, a mobile app test, things like that. So it's completely different. And again, it's a misconception out there that we talk to a lot of people about and say it's not a pen test. It's a red team.
Yeah. That's probably one of the more valuable outputs of FedRAMP is like the scrutiny around the pen test, right? Because you can say that you have all these, I passed every audit ever. right?
Yeah. And early days, it was just the pen tests. And then they added the social engineering piece. Then they added, we do like a standard image attack or standard image analysis from a laptop. So you get a laptop from the customer, what a normal admin would get. And then we try to get into the cloud environment from there. So they added that as a test, and now they're adding the red team. So you're just further enhancing the type of technical tests that are happening.
What are some of the common breaches that you have seen? What are some of the common things that you do see? Is usually a social engineering aspect, right?
Yeah, I would say most. I can't think of that many customers that will pass the social engiering aspect because you're pinging a big subset of the users or admins.
You're gonna find
and
someone's
gonna get hit.
Sometimes the CISO.
Yeah, but it's what do you do after that?
Right.
What is the action you take? Are they taking the training right after? Have you kind of educated them on what they did wrong to be aware of it? So that one happens all the time. Tenant to tenant we'll get sometimes, or it might be just more of a, maybe they're disclosing some information in the backend code or something that we've uncovered. So, but I will say lately, I think the offerings have been a lot better, and maybe it's because we do a lot of annuals and they've kind of locked them down over time and it's gotten better. But Red Team has uncovered a lot recently in terms of how the organization is set up on the back end. We've been able to find out a lot of things through our Red Team exercises, which is good.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, so one of the differences also with Rev 5 was the privacy overlays just kind of like baked right into, they're right in NIST 800-53 now, and it's not a separate catalog that you're looking at. So some customers are looking at that. What do you think is driving that privacy at this point?
I think it's just the further expansion of the control set, right? They added the SR control family as well. Even the DoD SRG that just came out, the new one, they're adding more designations and a couple of different requirements onto it. So I think it's just the further enhancement of what they want to see locked down.
Yep.
It's just the evolution that's coming.
That's right. So as SR always cracks me up because I say SR for supply chain risk management. I feel like they had to just add risk.
Well, you couldn't do SC, right? SC was already taken.
It's already taken. So they're just running out of little two-letter
acronyms.
Two-letter acronym. That's all right. I mean, hey, you know what? NIST really does lead out in terms of security standards.
Yeah.
I mean, period. There's everything. If someone comes out with their own framework, it's going to be like, okay, how does this compare to NIST? How does this map to NIST?
Yeah, I agree.
And literally everybody's doing that. And then we have in Europe, maybe we have a little bit of influence from Europeans on like the privacy controls. Like correct. GDPR is pretty straightforward. Once you understand it, you go, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like everything is retrofit to that.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Okay. So, do customers ever ask you, hey, what am I going to get in terms of ROI on FedRAMP? Do people ask you guys about this?
They do. And it's a hard question to answer.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to preface this on the front end before we even start is like, what is your business case? Like what does your sales org look like? So if you were to get an authorization, how are you then going to go expand what you currently have with that one agency? What I've seen over time is you're probably not really getting much of your money back unless you have 4 or 5 different ATOs on hand, because it's a lot of expense to prepare to maintain that system and then get that 3PO assessment every year. So you should have a couple ATOs in hand to kind of further justify it. Now, that's just my understanding of the cost involved, but I don't know what the contract value is for all these products. So I think it's just, you need to see a couple or else it's going to be hard. It's hard to justify.
Yeah. You say like I think Tyler just ran this the other day, and Tyler's co-founder at Paramify. He said that 90% of the FedRAMP offerings are at the moderate level. Does that track for you?
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to see a couple of them now shifting toward high, but I think all the net new ones still are mostly coming in as moderate. It's the uplifts to high that we're having for the existing ATOs.
Yeah. And then when you have a high, you have a lot more ATOs, right?
Yeah.
We have, so I've been a part of this at some organizations where, some leader will say, we need to get FedRAMP just because.
Yeah.
Because they've heard it and they saw their peer that has FedRAMP. They're like, yeah, we need this too, right?
Yep.
And so it becomes like this sticker chase, and that's just probably not going to.
It's not. It's never good to just say, hey, I want to go after it. It's, do you really need it? Do you have the business case to justify it? Because it's not cheap.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of time.
It's a lot of time beyond just like implementing the security.
Yeah.
And it's just like the commitment to ongoing monitoring.
Yep.
So in the past, and this is a problem too, right? We had a busy season, right? Every company has a busy season where you're going through the audit. And so that's when everybody's like, oh, like they're done with their vacations. They're like, okay, now it's time to focus. And it takes like 2 months to get that focus. And you're like, oh my gosh. And then they find something right before the audit. And they're like, oh shoot, like we got to go talk to the auditor. Like, and they're a little scared if they don't have a lot of experience and they don't want to be like maybe forthright about it. And they're like, how do we, and you do all this mental gymnastics, documentation gymnastics before you're talking to the auditor. And so, just all in that period, it's really stressful, and it doesn't, I mean, it's just awful, right? It kind of defeats the purpose of the audit. You guys have actually a pretty innovative approach. I've seen with some of my customers, you guys do it a little different than us.
Yeah. So we saw that strain that customers had, and that's even before we come in. And then we come in and we're there for 3 to 4 months, and like, it's not a fun time period either, because we're asking for, hundreds, thousands of pieces of evidence, and we got to produce a SAR by a certain due date. So we said, how can we make this easier on everybody? So we leveraged, FedRAMP put out a document called the Timeliness of Testing Guidelines. And in it basically says how long evidence is good for, whether that's scan data, pen test data, and controls assessments. And we realized we don't have to do this all in 3 months. So we spread it out over the course of a year. Now, there's a caveat, only works for an annual assessment, because you have to get authorized first before we can roll you into the program, because the timeliness testing guidelines is pretty adamant about initial assessments. You have to have, it's only valid for a shorter period of time,
right?
Which is good because you want it current by the time they go to review.
Right.
So in this annual assessment, we basically do a month of planning on the front end, and we have a month of reporting on the back end, and 10 months of testing. So it sounds terrible. You're like, oh my God, I don't want my 3PO in there every single month. But when you look at it as if you're testing an average of 200 controls a year and you divide it by 10, you're testing 20 controls a month, which is basically like a family or two, depending on what your subset is. It's a lot easier to digest that on a monthly basis. And then you say, all right, within that given month, we always try to start easy to start, is let's do the -1 controls and like AT or PS. So it's like, you just came off the audit, you're going to roll into this new approach, and we're going to take it easy. Now, let's say you find something. Let's say your security awareness training was abysmal. People didn't take it. You failed it. You would know right then and there that you failed that control. You now have 10, 11 months to fix it. So you now have the ability to get identified findings earlier. And now you can fix it before we have to produce a SAR, because the SAR is going to be due by your annual due date anyway. So that's the whole schedule is driven by that. So we call it a continuous assessment approach. We have a platform we're building on the back end called FedRAMP, which is kind of like the means in which we'll do the assessment. Our whole approach used to be called FedRAMP. We've now changed it. Now it's a continuous assessment program. So we test the controls over the course of those 10 months, and then we do pen tests kind of around the middle time frame, because we want that to be closer to the SAR due date. And then we do the scans kind of in that later quarter of the cycle. So those are a little bit more fresh. Some of our customers, they do con month rusts. So we'll test them anyway throughout the month, so it's a little easier. But it's a way to get feedback from the 3PO. You're not rushing to finish it. From our viewpoint is we test the control, we write up the control, we QA the control write up, and that family is done. If you pass it, we're done. We're not touching it again. And we can kind of go down our mental note of, okay, we had 200 controls. We're now down to 180. We're down to 160. And we just kind of work our way down. And you get to pick which controls you do when. So some of our customers are like, I want the heavy ones up front because I want to know and I want more time to fix it. Others are like, let's start me out small and then we'll work our way up to it. We like to, even in the middle, if there is an office location we can go to, we like to do some of our, we're talking like EC2 or IA51, like those bigger controls, CM6. We'll try to do like a 2-day on site and like, let's do it together. It's a little bit easier to work through some of those. So we try to do those kind of in the middle somewhere. But it's kind of customizable to the customer in terms of what controls or what families happen when. But it's the way of getting us into that continuous approach of, we're there, you can ask us questions. From a cost standpoint, it doesn't cost any different. We just spread out our work. customers like the fact that from a billing perspective, they're now, instead of getting a 3-month crazy bill, you're now got spread over 12. So that's nice.
Yeah.
So we kind of, it's like an easier way to approach it. So it's not this like heavy for 3 months and then it dies off and it was heavy again 9 months later. So
how's like PMO responding to that?
It's good. So we briefed them, it's probably about 2 years ago now. We briefed the PMO, and it was probably like 20 to 30 people from PMO on the call at that time. I've never had that many PMO people on call. Briefed them on it. They loved it. They thought it was great. They asked if it was like proprietary to us, which we said no. Like we don't want it to be the only one to do this. We want others to adopt a similar approach. And then we briefed the JAB, and they asked some questions and, when's the SAP due and when's the POEM a POEM? So we walked through all that kind of stuff with them. But in the end, they signed off on it as well. We've been piloting it with a couple of customers now, weaving in our platform now. So we'll be piloting that out here shortly. And it's a nicer way of spreading it out. I guess that's the best way to really put it.
Yeah, I love it. So, I mean, you're on the hook for continuous monitoring anyways.
Exactly.
Right. You have to do those scans early and often. And so it's probably a way just to kind of.
Yeah. And you get, what I like about it is for the ones we piloted out, the number of control findings decreased over time. Because again, if we flag it in month 3, you've now got a couple months to fix it, and we just go back in and revalidate it. So it's a way to kind of close those in advance. Now, the scans are still going to happen later, so you're going to have to fix those. Pen test is in the middle. Normally, you get that stuff fixed. You can weave red team in there as well, wherever you want. But it's just an easier way to kind of approach that assessment, so it's not so bearing. But what we really like and where we want to go with it is, okay, we've done this for FedRAMP. We normalize it. FedRAMP's the big beast in the room when it comes to compliance frameworks. What if you have SOC? Like you have SOC 2 you got to do. Well, if the evidence requests and the interview questions are similar in a similar environment, could you not do those controls and requirements at one point in the cycle to where it could work for both? So let's say your SOC report is due like June 30th, but your FedRAMP one is due September 30th. Well, can you make sure you covered all the SOC that you would need before the June date and then get all the FedRAMP stuff that's similar at that same time frame, and then everything post June to September is just FedRAMP specific? Can you do that and then get 2 reports done with one thing? So, because we want to, there's too many frameworks out there. I think the average number of frameworks at a CSPS that covers like 6 or 7 framework, like it's ridiculous.
Right.
So how do you scale over time if you don't spread this out and find ways to, leverage the evidence multiple times, but still keep it fresh for all the frameworks that, whatever the requirements are for that framework?
Yeah. We talked about this. On your side, if you've seen like how multi-factor authentication is spreads across, FedRAMP, SOC, ISO, whatever else, it'd be nice. And even within the framework itself, like, you're going to talk about multi-factor authentication in a little bit, and it's all in an IA, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to talk about it maybe in a few other areas, right? You would like to just do that once, right? In your assessment.
Yeah. Imagine if you had to pull that evidence multiple times. As long as, again, the environment has to be similar or the same, or maybe the question's the same and you're pulling 2 pieces of evidence, whatever, but try to reduce the number of questions you ask. Try to reduce the number of evidence you have to collect. And I think it just makes it easier for everybody.
Yeah. So your auditor, like when people are looking at who to work with for a 3PAO, like I think you ask them about that. Hey, what's your approach?
Yeah.
Because I think if you have like a nefarious 3PAO or a nefarious consultant, they're like, you know what, I'm just going to give this to some kid and I'm going to have them go AC1 Part A all the way through SA16. And you don't want to do that from a quality perspective because it's just like so hard. So maybe have people explain what their approach is for like how to gain efficiencies.
Exactly. Because even if you're doing and we do both that. We still do this continuous assessment approach for some customers and we do a standard approach for others because it doesn't work for everybody. They don't need it. But like when you test AC, you don't go straight down the list. Like you can, as you're getting into some of the AC controls, you're going to cover some of the IA controls. So you have to understand what the requirements are. And it's hard to teach that to a newcomer on the team. So yeah, you got to find a way to split it up where it makes sense. And I know when I was training people up, it was hard because I was jumping all over the place and I know it drove them nuts. But in the end, I think you realize you want to keep the flow of the conversation going, not be like, okay, AC to A. and then cover it. And then AC3B, like it just, you can't go in that order. It's too, everyone falls asleep on the call because we don't do this remotely now. We don't do it in person much anymore.
Yeah.
So find a way to keep the flow of the conversation going. And when your question gets answered, like, what does that lead to? Does it bring you down another path? Because like, for example, when we're logging in or having the customer log in to show us like a warning banner, AC8. So they'll boot up the machine. They're going to see the banner, hit OK or accept whatever, and they're going to type their username and password. Well, that's IA51 and IA6 because you see the obstruction of the.
Yeah.
So like knowing that as you go, so you're not having to come back. Okay, now we need to go back and log in again and grab this. So that's the training aspect that's really hard. But every 3PO has this problem, and they have their own way of building training programs so people can follow that flow. So it just has more of a casual conversation with the customer.
100%. Yeah, I think I remember when I was my first audit experience doing IT audit, at PwC, and just I have no idea.
Yeah,
I
think we all went through it.
I just don't know anything, and then you could lean on your senior, right? That really knew what was going on. And it takes about 2 or 3 busy seasons, right, to really get your chops and get
comfortable.
To get comfortable, right? And then it's. If you've made it that far, then you have a great career ahead of you if you like it.
If you like it.
If you like it. I think that's interesting that you're doing that approach because that whole interim testing, we did a little bit of that at PwC versus like, hey, give us all your Q1 stuff, all your Q1 evidence at the end of the year makes no sense, right? You want to catch those things early and often.
Yeah. I think FedRAMP's going down this path too, or government is. So in the past, old FISMA days, it was you get an assessment, you're good for your ATO is good for 3 years, nothing happened. Then it was, all right, you're good for 3 years, but every year you do an annual. And then I think DoD recently published something about their continuous authorization approach, and I think FedRAMP's thinking about it as well. So I think it's where we're going to probably end up going anyway, because so much stuff gets done and then shelved. And then no one knows what happens until they come back a year later.
People leave.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. What if you lose your staff? What if everybody just gets up and walks out? And what we like about the continuous test approach from our side is, let's say we lost a team member. Like, it's okay because we would have already tested some. Those write-ups are done. You're not losing that intel. So they've already kind of begun the process, and you can just bring someone else in to kind of keep continuing it down the path. So you're not dealing with a turnover staff right before an assessment. You're like, oh crap, what am I going to do to get someone else in here? Like, you've already done some of the work.
Yeah, 100%. Well, it's been really awesome talking about at FedRAMP and everything. So, what are some ways that CSPs can mitigate the cost? So we talked a little bit about efficiencies. What are some ways that you recommend to your clients? Like, hey, we talked a little bit about this, but what are some other ways?
Yeah, I think it's going to sound counterintuitive, but if you bring in a good advisor early, yes, you're paying the cost. I think you will save your time to market will be a lot faster. And you'll save on a lot of we call it retesting on the back end. So we end up with a lot of findings. Customers have to take a month or 2 to go fix it. Then they bring us back in, and we have to then process more hours to go do a change to test it again. Or you might uncover something like we've had sometimes where we go in and do an assessment and realize like they don't have FIPS 140-2 validation or validated modules in there at all. And like we stop. Like, we can't do anything at that point. And that's not a quick fix you can just do overnight either. So they have to go back to the drawing board, and like that, it sucks to have to tell someone that, but we are not going to put a package in front of an agency or PMO that won't meet, especially their like main federal mandates. So if you hire a good advisor early on, or someone who understands the requirements, like, they will pay dividends on the back end, because our assessment should be a lot smoother. We should have less findings, and it should be easier to kind of submit to the government.
Yeah. I was just talking to one of our partners about that. He just went through that with one of his clients.
Yeah.
That said, I'm like, how was your 4th of July? I'm like, he's like, the food was good. I was implementing FIPS.
Yeah, it happens
for my customer. It's a big pain. That's kind of and that's where security and dev, that's where they clash.
Yeah.
Because, FIPS compliance, FIPS 140-2, that doesn't look cool.
No.
It doesn't look cool at all.
No.
In fact, sometimes it breaks things if you don't implement it right. You're like, how come I'm getting a 500 error? I'm getting something.
Or you might
right?
you might use an external service that's not approved, and that's still a no-go.
Yeah.
Or like AWS or Microsoft service that's not authorized on their side. So your engineer might think it's a cool service, like, hey, we can use this to do this function, but if it's not authorized, you really can't use it.
Just don't do it.
So that's the type of stuff you want to know in advance. So either doing a gap assessment or having an advisor that kind of helps you along the way. I also think, again, cost might be an issue, but if your advisor can be there during the audit, they understand what we're going to be asking. And they're going to also understand what type of evidence am I need to submit. So if you have that, the assessment will go like that. So that makes our stuff easier. Now, in the end, if you are a really good advisor and your assessment goes smoothly, you get authorized, that advisor has basically worked themselves out of a job unless they're maintaining the package for them. But they've prepared the customer, they've gotten them ready, and then they're kind of moving on after that. So then you see the from our perspective, 3PO, you just have the 3PO cost to maintain it at that point moving forward, or any SCRs you had.
Right. So the cost just goes up. Like it kind of comes down a little bit after that.
Yeah, because you're not doing the full control set. Now they throw out new requirements and all that. So we got to factor those in. But theoretically, it should get easier after. We're at Rev 5 right now. I don't know when Rev 6 would come out. Let's hope it's not for a couple of years. But you shouldn't see that big uptick like we had this year with everybody migrating to Rev 5, because that was a big change for everybody.
Big change, and it came how long was it out? It came out like 4
it was
years
draft
later.
It took a while to come out, and it was draft, and then it was final late last year or something like that, and it was a quick turnaround for some people to do it, and some of them were not trivial changes.
Yeah,
right. Moving everything to DISA-STIGs. If you were on DISA-STIG, that's a big lift.
Big time. It helps to be a young company. We found for I'm like, oh yeah, FIPS is easy for us, right? STIGs. What are some of those benchmark controls that everybody needs before you even call it through PAO?
Yeah.
Right. What are some benchmark things? So you mentioned FIPS.
Yeah, FIPS is a big one.
Which will be 140-3 at some point.
Soon, maybe. We'll see.
Hopefully not.
But I always direct people to, in the readiness assessment template that's out there, it's table 4.1. So it's the federal mandates. So it says you have to have DNSSEC employed. Yep. You have to be able to meet the time frames for remediation, the 30, 90, 180, multi-factor authentications in there, accepting PIP cards from the Fed side. So I always direct people to that table. If you can't say yes to every one of those, we shouldn't be starting.
Yep.
And we've pushed people back because of that. Nice. So I always help them go there. And the other thing I do for someone to prepare, if they are tight on budget, is take that template and do a self-assessment RAR. Work through it. It covers about 60 to 70 controls, but it also covers the federal mandates. It covers your boundary diagram. Now it's got a bunch of API tables in there now, external services. So if you were to fill it out yourself, you have a general idea of what we're going to be looking for. Now you can't submit that. You can't go to the PMO and say, hey, I'm done a RAR, put me on the marketplace. But you can get that feeling internally of, am I actually ready? And should I bring a 3PO in?
Okay. Really good. Okay. So the RAR, table 4.1.
Table 4.1, RAR, yeah.
Nice. Michael, this has been super awesome. Okay. So advice to, we talked a little bit about your network matters.
It does.
It matters a whole lot in this business and information security. What other advice are you giving to your students, right, at JMU?
Yeah.
What is it that it's really going to set them up?
For those that are just starting out, I say be a sponge. Sit there and listen. Find a mentor, someone you can work with. When we bring new hires in, whether they're junior college grad coming out of school, or even somebody's just new to us, we assign them what's called a Fortreum friend. So it's who's that person that's not your boss that you can go ask the questions you don't want to ask your boss. And I think it helps get them acclimated. It helps get them feel comfortable. But just understand, it's going to take you time. It took everybody time. I remember going back to when we were talking about when I was at IRS and I was leading these 8-hour phone calls a day for a week. You stumble, you stutter, you have weird pauses in between. You just kind of get over it over time. And if you have the confidence when you're asking the question, your customers will understand. Sometimes what we'll do for some of our new hires is we also let our customer know, hey, I'll be on the call, but they're still relatively new, just to kind of bear with them, let them ask the question. And
awesome.
then, and I think it helps the customer feels okay, they didn't just put someone on. It's I'm on the call. I can ask the question if need be, but they got to learn. Everyone's got to learn. Else we're going to run out of people in this profession because no one's actually educating anybody to get up to speed. So I love the college hires that are coming out now. Like these kids are super smart. Like they know so many more things than I did when I came out of school. They're super eager. They want to learn. They want to get out there. They are a little shy when it comes to like getting in front of a customer, but that's okay. Like you get over that over time, but just be a sponge and understand that like you will learn from everybody on the team. You will learn and just ask questions, right? Whether it's someone that's directly on your team, someone who's more senior. I have an open door policy. People come in and ask me questions all they want. And I think that's the best way to get a foothold and understand what you're doing and feel comfortable moving forward.
Yeah. Knowledge pig, mentor, but knowledge pigs like don't know everything, right?
Yeah.
They're humble. They're open-minded.
Yeah.
They know that they only know very little.
Yeah.
Because college kids, I mean, especially my son's going to be, I don't know. He just got his first like real job doing sales. And he's like, oh my gosh, he's 17 and he's like knocking doors. And I just love it.
Yeah. But it builds like a good work ethic.
Yeah.
So that's what I look for. Like I was not, when I was in school, I had good grades, but they weren't the best, but I worked all through college, and I look for people that are hard workers, and just want to prove their worth. Like that's what I look for. So I could care less what your GPA is. I want to know someone who's, hey, maybe you had to work all through college because you had to pay for it yourself. They're going to be a hard worker. Or we have a lot of people that have come just, from the military, right? They get out of the military. They're hardworking people. Yeah. So I will hire them day in and day out. We hired a bunch of like women who had kids and then got back in the workforce. Hardworking people.
Oh my gosh.
Like it is great. It's interesting dynamic because they are coming in and they don't have the experience, but oh my God, they pick it up so much faster than everybody else.
100%.
Like it's awesome. So give them 6 months to a year and like they're running the show. And it's awesome. So you'd be surprised at where you can find people, but it's that culture fit, like you and I talking about earlier today. It's a culture fit and making sure that they are just that hardworking individual and then fit in the team.
Yeah. What are some like red flags that where people like say, hey, you know what, you need to?
One of my biggest pet peeves is like talking over a client. Like let the client talk, let them explain what they're doing. Don't interrupt them, just let them go. Sometimes it might drag out your interview sessions, but don't be the one rambling either when it comes to an interview. Like, what's your question? What's your ask? Get the evidence and kind of move on. So we've seen in interviews, like college kids or other hires, like they'll talk forever. But just be a good listener too. I think that's very helpful.
Yeah. Well, incredible, right? Okay. There's lots of like great advice in here. So thankful for you coming on to the show, Michael. Really appreciate you. Where can people find out more about Fortreum?
Yeah, so check out our website. So www.fortreum.com. We have a bunch of postings up there, some stuff about Rev 5 transition. We did a sales. Well, a lot of customers have issues with getting a sponsor. So we put a video up there recently about, what's the sales proposition for, getting a sponsor, like what does it mean? What's the business case, that type of approach. So that's up there as well. And then, just reach out. If you got questions, like we have just info@fortreum.com is our general email address. I'm all about educating the customer, whether it means we get work out of it or not, it's okay. Like I want the customer to succeed. I want to see them get on the marketplace. I want to see them authorized. And if it just helps, we're the ones that kind of guided them in the right direction, perfect. That's what I care about.
All right. Thanks so much, Michael.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.